Guys, in today's video, we're going to talk about specifically negotiating leases, okay? Leases, that's your agreement with the landlord to rent the property, okay? So that's your legal agreement, the lease you sign. If you're a permanent tenant in a rental property, for example, you will sign a year's lease. And that has a bunch of terms and conditions in it, but the main aspect that you're agreeing on is how much rent you're going to pay and how long you're going to pay that for. Okay, and then there's all kinds of other terms that are going to come into that. They are usually preloaded. Okay, they're usually a template that landlords use, or if you're renting off Zillow.com, they also have standard templates of leases that landlords can use, and you actually sign your lease through Zillow.com. Okay, so if you intend to Airbnb or operate short-term rental, you obviously need specific agreements in place. First of all, that you can operate as a short-term rental, i.e. sublet. Essentially what you're doing is you're subletting a property on a short-term basis to guests through Airbnb or Booking.com or VRBO or whatever you use, okay? So that needs to be agreed in your lease to keep you legally covered to operate your business. Does that make sense? So you want to always have the terms that are beneficial to you. Let's address something first of all. I've heard of people running Airbnbs, right? I know people personally who run Airbnbs who overpay on rent. So they pay extra per month for the privilege of Airbnb the property, of being allowed to sublet, okay? This is absolute nonsense. You do not need to do this. You should never be overpaying on rent, okay? Because there is no downside to the landlord for you doing this. They are taking equal amount of risk if they take a long-term tenant who can party, who can wreck their property, and are going to likely leave the property in a worse state than you will, because as an Airbnb host, you're incentivized to make sure your property looks to the highest standard for every guest that comes. Okay, we're going after 5-star reviews. We want to make sure that people have good stays in our properties, so we make sure it's in tip-top condition. And that's going to be running that way until the lease ends and we renegotiate with the landlord. Okay, and once that happens, you'll get even better terms because you've kept the property so well. Okay, so you need to get that frame into your head at the start, that you're going to be the best tenant, the best possible option for this landlord. And you want to explain that to them. You want to say, hey, look, like, I'm going to be the best tenant you've ever had. You're not going to have another tenant like me. You're not going to need to get another tenant. I'm going to rent this place for as long as you're renting it, until you want to sell. Okay, so that's important when you're negotiating a lease. Never overpay. And always have it in writing. We use what's called an addendum, a lease addendum. So it's a separate piece of paper that describes, we have lease agreement with such and such property between such and such a person, myself and the landlord, and we agree that I am able to operate the property as a short-term rental. I have a template for this, which I share with guys in the community, but that's basically what it is, okay? A lease addendum, to make sure you're legally covered for that. Then you want to actually add terms that benefit you, but you want to frame it to the landlord like it's going to benefit them, okay? And a specific term that I always go after is I say to the landlord, hey, look, you may be, wondering if this is the best option for you, so I'll tell you what, why don't we have a clause in the lease that says if either one of us want to terminate the lease on a 30-day basis, so we give 30 days warning, we can terminate the lease and we leave, and there's no problems, there's no, you're tied to the lease agreement for the full year. You don't have to keep me as a tenant if you decide you want to sell the property early, or you decide that this Airbnb thing isn't working out for you. Let's have our terms ingrained in the lease that we give a 30-day notice and either party can walk away. And you want to make sure that that includes you getting your deposit back. As long as I give you the property in better condition than you gave it to me, or as good, then we agree that I get my deposit back. Landlords can like this, some are wary, but some actually like to have that, way out. They're never going to need it. They're never going to want you to get out of the property because you are going to be a good tenant, but you want to have that in there. So if the property isn't working for you, say the area turns out to not be what as good as you thought it might be, maybe the area is a bit shady and you didn't realize that to start with, you want to give yourself, a way out. Okay, so you want to have that ingrained in the lease, and that is what you're going to negotiate. Okay, so always make sure that the lease works for you. Understand that you are the best option for this landlord, not a long-term tenant. Okay, and have that in the lease so that it actually favors you if you ever want to walk away, or if you ever decide, this isn't working out for me, or you don't want to overpay. You need to make sure that you negotiate this with the landlord. Look, you know, if the landlord even mentions overpaying, just say, whoa, you know, that's not something I'm ever open to. You know, what I provide to you as a landlord is a surety, is guarantee, is a professionally run property that's not going to have, you know, holes in the walls for you to come to in a year's time, where the deposit that you got from the tenant isn't even going to cover the damages that you're going to have to repair. You're not going to have any damages. I'm going to take tip-top care of this property. And in fact, if you want to really get into negotiating, you can say, hey, look, I'm willing to sign a 2-year lease. I'm willing to sign a 3-year lease. Let's reduce the monthly payments. Okay? So that is something you can negotiate too, reducing the monthly payments and potentially no deposit up front or little deposit up front. Depends on how good your negotiating skills are, if you can get away with that, but I always advise going after as much as you can with these landlords. At the end of the day, it only eats into your profit if you're overpaying on rent, or if you're paying more than maybe you need to. It's only going to hit into your profit. It's only going to hit into your cash flow. It's only going to stop you getting more properties quicker.